Hello, Internet. This is once again new week, new episode from Competent Council. Always with you, Haffisz and Adi here. Adi, I'm gonna let you guess how many so far since both are in office, Anwar Ibrahim and Prabowo. How many times they met already officially? You wanna guess?
If it's just the both of them, I don't really recall how much. Probably twice, 3 times, once a year.
According to Awani, they have already met 4 times. So this is, of course, including the ASEAN meeting and Prabowo coming here. And then Anwar was just last week in Jakarta. Now, why I'm asking about this? Because there was a statement, joint statement by Prabowo and Anwar Ibrahim about a dispute territory in southeast of Sabah, Tawau region area. So that's where the border of Kalimantan and Tawau area. And this is a very disputed area because I think in 2015 or something, 2016, Malaysia was awarded Sipadan and Ligitan Island. If some of us remember, viewers remembers of that, and you'll be hooray! So Sipadan is us, but there's a lot more up for grabs actually, and hanging in the courts of where the dispute of an area where Indonesians call it Ambalat, but technical term is the ND6 and ND7. These are the disputed territories. What's your impressions from this so far before I address what being said by the opposition, PN, and other members of the public?
Oh, okay. I didn't think that we're going to be targeting at how domestic reception to this issue of Ambalat. But yeah, I mean, it's an old issue. It was settled, I think, with the ICJ back in 2002 when they awarded Sipadan and Ligitan Islands to Malaysia. But I think the issue, right, was that it did not really settle any maritime boundaries within the area, and Ambalat is included with one of them. So this is an issue that hasn't really been fully resolved, Hafiz, and only now we see pop up because, hey, there's a piece of concern and brought back to attention by our national leaders and by the national leaders of Indonesia, saying that, okay, this is something that hasn't been addressed. It hasn't been fully been resolved. There's Sipadan Ligitan, yes, but now there's still, like you said, up for grabs, but and territories that has not been fully resolved or actually clarified properly between both parties here. And well, I think that is why we are having this situation now with our own Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and President Prabowo Subianto suddenly announcing that they're going to have a joint development agreement, a JDA for Ambalat, which they agreed to cooperate in resource extraction without trying to encroach on anyone's sovereignty here. So they're going to have something like joint oil and gas exploration. They're going to avoid prejudicing each other's legal claim, and they'll have some kind of draft to implement all this as a cooperative framework. So this is a case of, okay, we want to find a way to extract resources. We're going to find a way to exploit the resources here. We're going to develop this area without trying to touch on anybody's toes. Easier said than done, because everybody would want to maximize the efficiency in the area unless these two leaders are able to find an amicable framework that is able to last after their term. Because we are not too sure if, let's say, somebody after Prabowo or someone after Prime Minister Anwar would be a bit more gung-ho or a bit more proactive in this region. They would probably say, okay, we should deserve more of this because we have Sipadan and Ligitan, so by right we should have this, right? Or then bring it to the courts once again, right? So this is going to be a lot of work needed to be taken by both administrations to ensure that if they are going to cooperate, it's not just going to cooperate within these respective leaders' terms. So I think that is what I can see from the foreign side. Hafiz, you wanted to bring up what the opposition was about to say?
Yes, I just want to divide between the Sabahan leaders, oppositions. Well, not really opposition, but Sabahan leaders, all right? And then the oppositions from the PN, particularly some figures from Pakatan Nasional. So let me start with Sabahan's leaders. So there are few Sabahan leaders that a knee-jerk reaction, I would say, because all that they react to is a headline. And of course, media gonna, quote like, hey, there's an agreement, co-joint statement by Prime Minister Anwar and Prabowo in Jakarta saying that there's gonna be a joint venture in Ambalat. Of course, the reactions from these several Sabah state leaders were just like, "Oh, we were not involved in this. We don't know. We were in the dark. Why will you not be consulted about this?" I think this is just they should have like refrained from exposing such because from what I understand that Anwar visits to Indonesia and he's supposed to have like informal discussions about this, but Prabowo decided that he wants to make it, like he want to rush things. So I think Anwar kind of in a difficult place to just to entertain what's Prabowo wants in Jakarta. So basically, what happens in this situation is that there's an economic reasons for this kind of development, but in terms of territorial discussion is still ongoing parallel with this, because just like Malaysia's foreign minister Tokmat says that while we are in the discussions or in the discussion for the boundaries is still in the round table, why don't we just use this time that we have, because the dispute it's not going to take like a year or two. It's going to take like at least 2 decades to resolve. So at the meantime, it's for our beneficial, for Malaysia and Indonesia beneficial, to put this put it aside and go on with a joint venture, but primarily from Petronas side and Pertamina, because what is they waiting for? They know there's a lot of reserve here, oil and gas. So let's go for it. And the territory side, we just gonna live up to the ICJ. So that's one thing. From Perikatan Nasional that I also get is that they actually demanding more details from an urban, and I kind of agree with this. Like, I think maybe Wisma Putra or some of the ministry from Anwar side that should release a statement or whatever. But as for now, we know as we record this, Anwar is still in Brazil, so maybe he would need to answer this in Parliament, maybe whenever Parliament is convening, or made a press statement that because this is a matter of the country's sovereignty, all right? So, yes, while we understand that they may find some ways to benefit economically, but we should not give in terms of like even an inch of our so-called land. Well, it's not lands in the middle of the sea. So it's something that needs to be reiterated, like because the perceptions that we're being played right now by the opposition is that, oh, there you go, Anwar jual tanah Malaysia lagi, kedaulatan tercabar. Those kind of rhetoric have been played, and this is not nice. Not just in terms of internally, but in our image as Malaysia. Because remember, Adi, we were we were in the losing side when it comes to Pulau Batu Putih. So that kind of news still lingers in our head, and it's not gonna be a good image again if Ambalat is another Batu Putih case here. So Anwar must make it very clear in terms of legality. It's still in dispute, but for the sake of time or whatever, let's benefit this from economically speaking, while the court will take its course. So that's mainly the argument from Perikatan Nasional and several Sabah states leaders to this situation, Adi.
Yeah, I think I have to sort of mirror a bit of the concerns made by the Sabahan leaders here, Haffiz, because, well, like you said, Batu Putih was a hallmark to showcase that to how effective really is the Malaysian government in trying to administer foreign affairs when it comes to territorial disputes. Now, when it comes to a dispute such as the Ambalat block, right? I this is going to be an issue of sovereignty here, right? Now, every country, both countries, both parties, any country that is having a territorial dispute will always try to assert its own sovereignty over a particular disputed region. That's just natural because they see it all. It's always going to be seen as a zero-sum game here, right? You have compromises of not just resources but security as well. So, given a jurisdiction over a particular area that decreases one's own potential autonomy and agency within the territory, will always bring up alarm bells for the side that is not going to benefit from it, right? So I think right now, this whole push towards a joint development agreement is a pragmatic solution right now being deployed by the Prime Minister. It's not going to make everybody happy, but I think I understand when the Saban leaders are saying that, oh, well, we're not being consulted on the matter. So I have to agree. But at the same time, there is not a formal infrastructure, formal framework for Sabahan leaders to actually be participating in a bilateral negotiation such as this, right? Unless it has to do with development on the state level. So I think that highlights an even wider issue here is that the Sabah state government does not really have the ability to project itself on the regional level. It has not the ability to act in a way that negotiates its interests at the regional level. It's not like now Sarawak, what Sarawak is doing, they're sending out envoys to Indonesia, they're sending out envoys to Brunei, to other countries in the region to assert its position there to show that it's not just a subservient or waiting for what Wisma Putra does, but what it can do on its own as well. Sabah, I don't think, has this kind of precedent or convention to be able to strike out on its own and say that, okay, maybe we want to talk to Kalimantan, and so we don't need to wait for prime minister to go all the way to Jakarta and have a discussion there. We can just go to see the chief minister can go or send an envoy to meet the governor, the governors of Kalimantan, or send meet their envoys, vice versa. So this is a trend. This is a trend where there's still too much national decision making here that is not exactly in touch maybe with the local reality that is happening, right? Because Malaysia, if you, let's say, a lawmaker in Putrajaya, you're not going to feel the creeping arm of Indonesian disputes, right? Breathing down your neck if you're over there in Malaya as compared to if you are in Sabah. So this idea of proximity dictating convention must be addressed here. And I think the best way is that the the federal government must find a way to allow the Sabah state government more agency, more autonomy. I know autonomy would ring some alarm bells for some people, to be able to project its position within the region autonomously. Perhaps it can follow particular conventions and norms that is set up by Wisma Putra in terms of conditions. You can attach a Wisma Putra officer to the state government to ensure that it's still aligned with national policy and national direction. But this is would help with the sub-regional relations and cool off in a more non-formal way or high stakes kind of way. So that is one thing. Another is this whole joint development, right? So this is not new here. We've done Malaysia has deployed this several times in the past year. They've done that with the Gulf of Thailand when they produce a GDA with Thailand to resolve a dispute. And I think till now there hasn't been that much flare-ups or increase in tensions in that regard. I believe we've also have a fisheries agreement in the Sulu Sea with the Philippines, so that has helped cool some tensions. So this is not a new a new or novel ideas. This is a precedent here, and I think it reflects a growing norm in the region, where when you have overlapping maritime claims, you would have joint developments rather than trying to have a battle of sovereignty over here and there. And I think it's because the region is a bit more integrated with one another. We're able to talk with one another at the regional level. Now, this I feel is in contrast to how when the region is able to resolve its issues internally, it seems to be able to do so with some level of efficacy, especially with Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, right? It seems there's a bit more, it's a higher degree of being able to resolve regional disputes here and there. Of course, there's still some that are going to be persistent than others, but of course, it is in a way milder compared to larger regional security issues such as the South China Sea. I believe this is the kind of approach that has been that the ASEAN members have been trying to socialize China and Beijing towards adopting a more shared responsibility, more joint development, more integration between one another so that everyone is able to benefit. So I think this GDA, we shall see how it is being drafted and how it is being developed. But of course, the persistent issue here is that, of course, maybe Sabahans should be consulted, and maybe they should open up a conversation when it comes to how bilateral negotiations in terms of tension management can be addressed. We can have a bigger conversation of that. Maybe some can disagree, saying, no, that should be a national concern, right? That should be formulated at the national level, right? But however, the national government isn't just made up of Malayan policymakers now, are they?
Yeah, I think I can concur with you, Adi, when you said this is not the unprecedented innovation from both sides, because just even this year there's a agreement between Malaysia and Singapore. If you want to talk about cross-border. Joint statement, I mean joint venture, right? About just JSSEZ. So yes, it's not about overlapping claim, but this is a two country that utilizing each other's strength, and I think this is kind of similar. And this is, I think, the Madadi government that wants to project themselves within ASEAN, and as the ASEAN leader, they by they I mean Anwar Ibrahim, really wants to leverage on this and make as much as impact possible to the realm of ASEAN. I mean, we keep saying Anwar is very popular outside Malaysia, and he seems to be like best buddy with around the people, leaders around the world. And we know Prabowo used to study it here in Malaysia. Then what the point of all this, all the cordial relationships that you have, informal, formal? Now this is something you should transpire in this kind of form, at least. Like maybe they cannot push too much on territory dispute, because that's a matter of ICJ. But what can they do about it while they're still the presidents, the leader of their respective country? So yeah, I think this is definitely a win-win situation. But of course, it all depends. The devil is in the details. When as much as we learn about as we go, and all the details, then it should be a economic benefit to both of us, to both country. Similarly with what Malaysia and Singapore venture also. Maybe that's the last point on Ambalat, because Adi, in this week also, Sabah is quite busy, especially on Monday. So how are we going to segue to the next one?
Well, I think how do we segue? Okay, let me think about this. I think I'll just talk one last word on the whole Ambalat thing.
Okay.
I think is that we need to play a very fine line here, because it seems to be the case that how I see it is that you have Malaysia, you have Indonesia negotiating, right? But we have to understand that Sabah as an entity is also wedged in between these negotiations, right? And I think it needs to be hammered home that Sabah needs to be somehow included in these discussions here, right? It needs to be a way that is conducive for everyone that is involved. And I think the first port of call, like I mentioned, okay, maybe we can set up a, devolution of terms of or giving autonomy or giving jurisdiction to the Sabah state government to send out envoys and all that for informal expression. But of course, there's going to be a national conversation overall. There's also going to be touching on the Territorial Sea Act, because we know that a lot of offshore management is under federal law. And will this whole Ambalat thing reinforce or diminish respect for that arrangement, right? Because we saw Batu Putih, and that caused quite an uproar for the Madani administration. So the Madani administration has to really prove themselves as capable stewards over sovereignty disputes, to be able to uphold the fact that if we're going to be playing by their rules that they have arbitrarily set out, right? Show us, to the Sabahans, that these are rules worth following, that these are proactive, productive, and effective frameworks that can be followed. Do that, and then I think we can respect whatever jurisdiction that the federal government wants to have, since it can show it can know better. So, but that remains to be seen, right? the whole JDA could amount to just cooling relationships and then making sure that it delays any kind of tensions from being sparked later on. It could really just amount to that. Really, I never seen any case of JDA being used for economic development, even though there's resources to be extracted. It's more just to try to diffuse an awkward situation.
Right. And yeah, I mean like I mentioned, Adi, because this one is gonna be heavy on you because listeners out there, if you don't know, Adi is a someone's that whole MA63 very close to his heart. He is the master of the subjects here. So I
Not
mean,
really.
let's get on with it.
I wouldn't say so. A lot of people have proven me wrong. So
I mean, at least compared to me. So what's the update, I guess, Adi, from the court this morning?
Okay, well, at the time of this recording on Monday, 7th of July 2025, the courts was very busy because they're hearing a judicial review from the Sabah Law Society on the 40% revenue claim. So the Sabah Law Society has been challenging the federal government, saying that it has not upheld its constitutional right to uphold a 40% revenue sharing agreement between the Sabah state government and the federal government, which was established when the country was formed, when Malaysia itself was formed. Right. So we saw a judicial review today where the Sabah Law Society argued that it is, like I said, the federal government is in breach of not upholding that because they have not reviewed a period of what that 40% is, and then now they are saying that there are years that has been lost. They call it the lost years, that the payment of the 40% has not been given to the Sabah state government. So it's trying to prove that the integrity of the constitution is being disrupted and undermined by the complacency of the federal government for all these decades, right? And in attendance, I think I don't know why the highlight was this, but the highlight was that there was attendance from Sabahan, the assemblymen from all sides of the political spectrum attending and sitting down in the courts to hear what is going on. You had Warisan Shafi Abdal, you had SAPP's Yong Tek Lee, you had Daryl Laking present as well, you had DAP present as well, all in the courthouse trying to see what is the decision that is going to be made. So very interesting situation, especially because the Dewan Undangan Negeri is also sitting today because they also have a short special session to produce and present a supplementary budget. I think this is the last Dun sitting before the state government is going to be dissolved as we head into elections. So a very, very busy day today. If on one side you had the politicians discussing and the assemblymen discussing, debating, then you had the courts also being going to work on a very landmark issue here. So all things considered, very busy day for Sabah and a lot to look forward to. What do you think of this?
Adi, I just want to listen what you have to say on some of the argument that SLS made, that they mentioned about it was the payment was stopped in 1969, but before that, I think 4 or 5 years, there was a yearly payment based on that 40%. So we talked about this in the previous episode. I think a year ago. Was it a year ago where you made an appearance in front of the court? Yeah.
Yes, it was last year. I remember it was last year. I think, yeah. That was when the state government, for some reason, challenged what Sabah Law Society was doing. There was a huge protest about it, a huge gathering, and I was there. It was great fun, meeting a lot of friends there.
Yeah. So one of the things that we argued in that episode is that what is the formula to now get this 40%? Is it going to be a net profit, or is it revenue, or whatever? But it turns out that if there was a payment being made prior to 1969, so there is a way or formula that were used in those times. So what is the problem or the hurdle of reinstating that? Just, there's no need for a new formula. Just do it what we did in maybe 68 or 67.
I think it's because it's would be a very primitive formula because we're only looking towards revenues that was being generated by specific income streams at the time. And I think we've expanded from that, right? Sabah makes more money from different sources than it has since '69. Like, we didn't expect tourism to be such a huge contributor to state revenue. We didn't expect a lot more different types of taxes to be developed, all kinds of other duties and other revenue sources to be developed as well. Timber being one of them, palm oil being one of them, right? So I think in the formula, it cannot exactly be reused. I think in a way you have to I don't think it can be retrofitted as well because now we have different ways of assessing revenue, different ways to collect it as well. So it has to go through a completely new formula and system as well to decide how much really is being given when it comes to the 40%, right? So I've met people who come up with different kinds of formulas saying that it is net revenue. Some say it's some from something else. And all have a different configuration of resources, right? Some say that oil and gas has to be included. Some say that it doesn't need to. Some say it's just tax revenue. So that means you only have to engage with LHDN, right? So it's also depending on how you actually calculate what kind of revenue is being included here, right? When it comes to the 40%, I say it should be all of them regardless, right? Any money being taken out of Sabah to be given to the federal government, 40% doesn't matter from what income source, unless you have some kind of law that says no, that's not the case. It should all be given back to Sabah. Now, another funny thing about this formula is that I'm still going to be bringing this up because no one has ever been able to answer on this, especially when it comes to the administration of the prime minister. Is that remember last year during the Kamatan speech, he said that 16 billion in special allocations year on year given to Sabah exceeds the 40%, right? So does that mean they have a formula? Does that mean they have calculated on their own? Is it a Freudian slip on the prime minister's part? Because that's quite insulting to say that, well, the 40% revenue is less than 16 billion, right? Less than 60 billion, which they've given over the course of 3 years, right? So does that mean if the 40% is upheld, that you should be giving less than about 16 billion every year when it comes to the revenue? So
pay
how
up.
much? Yeah, so pay up, right? It's not some special allocation, not some special whatever, right? You pay that up, right? Since you already have it. If not, then say otherwise, because operationally, right, the Sabah state budget would be happy to take 16 billion, even though it may not be enough, to be honest, right? But I mean, well, the federal budget is year on year about 350 billion, right? So, what is 16 billion to the federal government giving back to Sabah, right? Because that it seems to belong to Sabah, the 40%, right? So that is what I'm trying to say when it comes to the formula. Is that there's many formulas floating around. The prime minister might have one, he may not have one. Like I said, it could just be a mistake on his part, a slip on his part to say nice things, but so far it backfires here and there, right? So that is one thing to tackle. But there's also this other argument saying that the special grant as well is also being brought up. I think someone brought it up as well. Is that Sabah is supposed to Sabah and Sarawak, I believe, is supposed to get a special grant for the sake of development and it's supposed to be reviewed every 4 to 5 years. And I think the last time it was increased was under former Prime Minister Ismail Sabri's time. That he was, I think he was one of the first to actually say that we need to increase it, we need to review it, and then later was taken up by PMX to say that we're going to review it, and then they sort of increased it. So, but because the grant itself is quite arbitrary, there's a lot doesn't really have transparency. And hasn't really had a legitimate review where Sabahan leaders are really consulted. So, the federal side argued that the previous reviews remain valid and that there's no mandatory timeline. So I think they use Article 112D, subsection 3, Article 3, which allows continuation of previous arrangements unless both parties agree to change. So they say, oh, well, we've been doing this all this time, so there's no issue. No one's brought it up. But, Sabah leaders have been bringing it up for a very long time. So that is what I think on the federal side has. I mean, I'm not really a legal expert on this. I can only really analyze this after the fact when the judgment is made and give me time to look through it. But whatever it is that I believe that Sabah Law Society is within its rights to challenge this because I think the physical results speaks for itself. There's not enough money going around in Sabah to develop it, right? If Malaysia is like we say Sabah is so rich and blessed in all these resources, right? If it's being extracted out, the 40% of that should be reflected on the 40% that should be being given back to Sabah. Now, because of that, it's not being given back. We don't have the money to fix our roads, build new roads. We don't have the money to ensure steady electricity supplies, steady water supply. You can chalk it up to there's also local responsibility on that front as well. But it's two sides of the same coin here. You have to have the resources as well. You also have to have the good governance to have it as well, right? So at least if you get one, you get one hand on the steering wheel.
Yeah, definitely. How state government causing up to federal government and try as much as milk as much as they can from the so-called desperate unity government. Holding on to power. With a few minutes left that we have, any other updates that you want to mention from SLS first full-blown hearing?
Well, I mean, of course, I wish SLS well, but and of course, I don't really know what happened more specifically this time because the only news report I got was that leaders were in attendance of this, and I think a decision is going to be made. So I think it was maybe untimely we had this, but of course, I just want to say it out loud because it's such a recent thing, and the timing is really good. So maybe we'll do another episode once it's details are a bit more clear. But what I'm happy is that there is no interference from any other party here, no surprise U-turns here and there from Sabah's side as well. But I think let's think about this strategically here, right? I believe because this is just a judicial approach, right? You're taking the federal government to court, right? But we know that the courts move at whatever how the law works, right? It still takes quite some time, right, to get through all this because they have to hear cases every single day and they have to so it's going to take some time. So I believe strategically speaking, there needs to be a three-pronged approach here. Is that you have the legal and institution reform, which is what the SLS is doing. They're, regardless of outcome, they're putting pressure to establish on their own a judicial impetus to put some pressure on the federal government to say that, okay, legally we're being challenged on this front. At the same time, I believe you need to mobilize civil society as well, which I thought was when I came to mind when I saw how many people showed up to the courthouse last year, where you should have as many civil society engagement as you can, NGOs, academic institutions, especially to continue just putting more pressure. Say that we demand more from our national government, that we need to expect more transparency, more fair treatment from our national government. If you put that out loud a bit more, that would be great. At the same time, the state government has to stop being very passive on this. It needs to back the legal process. It needs to go ahead and appoint those independent financial assessors and create a whole unit to monitor and audit the federal revenue. We already have one Sabahan in LHDM, so we should tap more into that. And we should be able to put pressure on these three fronts here to show that, okay, you can't push us around. We're all working towards supporting one another. I mean, these three elements are working towards supporting one another, and I think that is something that we have to push forward to when it comes to a call to action. So yeah, that's what I would say moving forward, because I don't want this to be a case of SLS is just on its own, right? And they should be supported by any individual that wants to see this whole 40% be resolved, because it's not just going to be a legal issue as well. It's going to be a political issue as well, the social issue as well, and an economic one.
Yeah, moving forward, like you mentioned, I would see it from an angle of the timing of the result or whatever, because state elections can happen the latest by in November. It will dissolve itself by November if HGG decided not to. So it would be interesting where the timing is, maybe in October or after the elections. That would be interesting, and it's a ticking time bomb as well for GRS and Mandatory government to milk as much as they can, because the expiry date for federal government is less than 2.5 years or 2 years left, 2027. So that's also need to speed up, because like you mentioned, things in the court will take not just days or weeks, could take months or years at least. So that's our hope for Sabahans. Any other update, we will keep all of you, our eyes on this definitely. So of course, you can always come to Competent Council if you wanna some updates especially for Sabah affairs, especially this SLS 40% entitlement hearing. Adi, any last word from you for this episode?
Yeah, I think my last word is that there's so many. I mean, this is not a very simple issue, cut and dry kind of issue, Hafiz. Of course, the result we wish it to be cut and dry. It's just pay up, give us what we deserve, right? But obviously, just because we deserve it doesn't mean it's going to be given so easily, right? So that one we have to work on a lot of fronts when it comes to pushing for the 40% here, right? Of course, there's so much technical jargon wrapped up in all these things, right? And I think when it comes to the homework, it needs to be done properly by everyone that is participating in this kind of conversation, me, myself included. I think I've said a few things that might be wrong, I think, or maybe incorrect here. So I'm happy to be corrected on this because I'm sure there are more positive interpretations and answers to what I've said here today. So, wishing Sabah Law Society all the best. This has been a saga, 3 years in the making, a lot of ups and downs here and there, but we have to keep our eyes out on that light at the end of the tunnel.
Definitely. So that's it for this episode. For those who have not yet subscribed, because I can see from the analytics data here that 60-70% of you are not subscribers. But if you're watching this, you think we should do more of this content, please consider subscribing and comment, like, share. You know what's the drill is. And I guess Adi and I will see you in the next episode.